Today is all about unstoppable evil. From the fall of Lucifer to the rise of Satanism, today I'll be exploring shocking possessions, strange ancient tales, and all the secrets of the big bad devil. Lucifer's Fall, Part 1. Everyone knows who the devil is, but not everyone knows his story. Not everyone is aware that the devil only appears in 2 chapters of the Old Testament, or that the passages are so vague, it's only assumed the entity in question is Satan. In the book of Ezekiel is where you can find the accepted version of the devil's fall from grace. It goes along the lines of, "You were blameless till unrighteousness was found in you. You were filled with violence and you sinned. So I, God, cast you as a profane thing and destroyed you, O guardian cherub." This isn't the entire passage, which is extremely long, but it's the main part focusing on the devil being cast down from heaven. As you can see, there is no specific name for this being who is cast down. Something evil is thrown from the mountain of God and destroyed, and it appears to be a guardian cherub, aka an angel. Still, nowhere does it specifically say Lucifer, Satan, or the devil is the one being cast down. This individual is nameless. The rest of the passage goes into more specific detail. It says the guardian cherub's heart was proud because he was beautiful, which corrupted him. God exposed him before the kings of the world and consumed him with fire and turned him to ashes. Talk about some serious combustion. Whoever this guardian cherub was, God did not like him one bit. But it's this next part I find really interesting. The passage ends with, "You have come to a dreadful end and shall be no more forever." If this is the devil who fell from heaven in the book of Ezekiel, God makes it abundantly clear that he's gone, done, toast, never to be seen again. He shouldn't be in hell because God effectively obliterated him. I haven't told you the most important part yet, the part that is going to blow your mind and make you rethink everything you know about the devil. That's coming up soon. The Devils Day Massacre. Every year on August 24th is the Devil's Day in Latin America. According to legends from Mexico to Peru, it's the day that everyone needs to stay home to avoid meeting the devil out in the street. The myth is quickly evaporating in the modern world, but there are those who still remember it. What they might not know is the true horror behind August 24th. August 24th is the feast day of St. Bartholomew, one of Jesus Christ's 12 disciples. His name is Nathanael in the Gospels. After Jesus' death and resurrection, St. Bartholomew spread the gospel across distant lands, especially in India and Armenia. In Armenia, he was brutally martyred. Ever since, August 24th has been a day to remember him by. August 24th was also the day of a tragic massacre that resulted in the deaths of around 25,000 people. Whoa, that turned dark quick. But this is a video about the devil, so believe me when I say it could get even darker. The Devil's Day Massacre, more often known as the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, happened on August 24th, 1572. It lasted for 2 full months. It all started in Paris with the Catholics lashing out against the Protestants. The Parisian Catholics feared the Protestants, known as the Huguenots, would rise up and take over the city. To prevent this from happening, the Catholics assassinated all the top Protestants who had arrived in the city for a royal wedding. If you've seen or read Game of Thrones, this was the real-life version of the Red Wedding. In the aftermath of the bloody marital mishap, the people of Paris learned that the Catholics were taking definitive action against the Protestants. An angry mob of Jesus followers picked up their torches and pitchforks. You would think they were going after a monster in a grain mill. They went from house to house and district to district, slaughtering every single Protestant. It didn't end in Paris. News of the slaughter spread, inspiring Catholics in other cities to take up arms. Soon the entire country was engulfed in mayhem and murder. The event is regarded by historians as one of the worst religious massacres to ever unfold. This is why St. Bartholomew's Day is also the Devil's Day, to summon the devil. In the Middle Ages, somebody tried to summon the devil. Well, a lot of someones tried to do this, but now archaeologists have found physical proof of one dastardly attempt at invoking Satan. The proof was discovered on a rolled-up piece of ancient lead in the bottom of a toilet. Weird, I know. Archaeologists were doing some preliminary work at a construction site in Rostock, Germany. They found a piece of lead at the bottom of a latrine, at first thinking it was just a piece of metal. When the researchers unfurled the scrap, they realized it was an artifact from the 15th century. Upon the metal, barely legible, experts identified a message. It was etched in tiny handwriting, written in Gothic script. When researchers took it back to their lab and decoded the message, they couldn't believe what they were reading. The message was as follows: Sathanas Teleki Beelzebub Hinrik Berith. Oh, did you want the English version? Translated into English, the text reads something along the lines of, I, Hinrik, curse Teleki with Beelzebub and Berith. Beelzebub was a popular name for the devil in medieval Germany. Berith was a common demonic spirit. Clearly, Hinrik was very upset with Teleki. But why the bad blood? Could it be that Teleki left Hinrik for another man? Was this a jealousy thing? Was Hinrik so furious that he had been abandoned that he invoked the name of the ultimate evil to smite his ex-girlfriend? Archaeologists think it's totally possible. After all, I'm sure we've all felt like cursing an ex at one point or another. Love hasn't changed much since the dawn of time. Jorg Ansorge noted that curse tablets were extremely popular in ancient days, especially in the Roman territories. From around 800 BC to 600 AD, people invoked the names of all sorts of demons to smite their enemies. Recently, a tablet from 1500 years ago was discovered in Israel. On its surface, someone had asked a demon to harm a rival dancer so that they would have the spotlight. Even though it was written in the Middle Ages, the curse feels weirdly modern. An even older tablet from 2400 years ago was found in Greece. This one had a curse asking the gods of the underworld to get rid of several tavern keepers. Perhaps the curse was written by the town drunkard after he'd been kicked out of all the taverns. The point here is that even without the devil, humans will turn to whatever power they can, all to smite their competition and seek revenge against their exes. What I want to know is if any of these attempts to summon the devil have worked. Do you think Hinrik got his revenge on Teleki? And now for number 10, but first it's shout-out time. I wanted to give a big thank you to Christy Gibson Cormier 4726 and user NR4RS2WJ2X for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Lucifer's Fall Part 2. Before the part in Ezekiel about the guardian cherub being cast out, the chapter is talking about a very real person. The passage I told you about earlier regarding the guardian cherub cast down by God starts with, Son of man, raise a lamentation over the king of Tyre, and say to him, Thus says the Lord God. From there, the passage goes on about how the king of Tyre was an anointed guardian cherub who was placed upon the holy mountain of God. The passage says, You were the signet of perfection. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. Topaz, diamond, sapphire, emerald, and crafted in gold were your settings. The passage is clearly describing a king who was resplendent with jewels. If you had never heard of the devil before and read this entire part of Ezekiel, you would assume the book is talking about the king of Tyre. It says his name and everything. You might be wondering how Christians explain the connection between Tyre and the devil. The most popular explanation is that the king of Tyre was Satan in the flesh. Satan showed up in a human skin suit and took over the city of Tyre just to defy God and cause chaos. Either that or Satan possessed the king, taking him over mind, body, and soul. What you don't often hear about is how the king of Tyre was a real man who ruled the ancient city of Tyre. His name was King Hyam I, and he ruled between 980 and 947 BC. King Hyam was an ally of King David and King Solomon. Hiram's name is on the list of 12 kings who ruled the ancient Phoenician city in the days of the Old Testament. When it comes to stories about Lucifer's fall from heaven, the one about King Hyam is the main source. This is the primary passage Christians turn to when they need to explain how the devil fell from heaven. Does it seem to you like the devil was kind of created out of thin air, taken out of context? Don't worry, I have more shocking examples of the devil's so-called fall from heaven coming right up in part 3. The Devil's Book of Magic. The Black Book is the most diabolical magical text that has ever been written. The book is technically mythical, with not one real copy held in any library or institution. The legend is that sorcerers and Satanists use the book as a source for their magic. The magic comes straight from the devil himself. To even get the book, the would-be sorcerer must make a deal with the devil. Once the sorcerer hands over their life and their soul, they receive the Black Book, filled to the brim with spells and maniacal enchantments. When the sorcerer dies, the book must be passed on to another magician. If the sorcerer fails to find a suitable apprentice, his or her soul is forever tormented, and they become a revenant, aka a ghost. You might be wondering who believes in the existence of such a profane book. The truth is that a lot of people do, especially in rural Russian villages. Many villagers believe dead sorcerers come into their town at midnight, dressed in black to peer at the homes of their living relatives. Russian myth also says there was once a copy of the Black Book at the bottom of the sea. A sorcerer ordered by an old witch uncovered the book and has been traveling the world with it ever since. He's like a traveling salesman, only dealing in devil spells. The Doctor and the Devil. There are so many exorcisms that occur across the world, there's probably one happening right now. And if it's happening in America, chances are the exorcist is joined by a medical professional, perhaps a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist like Dr. Richard Gallagher, who's a teacher by day and a fighter of Satan by night. Richard studied at Yale. He is a board-certified psychiatrist who hadn't intended to work alongside exorcists after graduation. But today he is one of the most sought-after psychiatrists to deal with demonic possession. Richard says it's real. Although he proudly calls himself a man of science, he says he has seen so many people possessed by demons that he cannot in good conscience say the devil doesn't exist. But what sort of evidence has Richard seen exactly? If you're like me, you want specific answers and irrefutable proof. Richard has seen that proof with his own eyes. He has witnessed victims of possession speaking perfect Latin even though they'd never spoken it before. He has seen objects fly off shelves. He's seen people read minds, extracting pieces of knowledge they couldn't have possibly known. One time he saw a woman, hardly 90 pounds, throw a 200-pound deacon across the room with the strength of an unbridled demon. Richard Gallagher's official title is Consultant on Demonic Possessions. For over 25 years, he has been called into situations to identify when a possession is real and when the individual is suffering from a mental illness. According to the man himself, he has seen more demonic possessions than any other physician. One of his more recent cases involved a woman named Julia, which is a pseudonym, not her real name. She approached her local priest claiming that she was being attacked by a demon. The priest referred Julia to an exorcist, who reached out to Richard. Richard was shocked when the young woman told him things about his life that she couldn't have possibly known. Things like what his cats were doing the night before he met with her, and that his mother tragically passed away of ovarian cancer. Richard even heard Julia speaking in demonic voices while in a trance, but not while he was near her. Julie's demonic voice came over the phone one night when he was talking to her priest, even though Julia was thousands of miles away and nowhere near a phone. Julia received an exorcism, and the demon left. I don't know where it went, presumably back to hell. Richard believed Julia was a true case of the devil flexing his muscles on this plane of existence. But do you think this was real, or was everyone involved crazy? Let me know your thoughts on possessions in the comments. Theophilus of Adana. What would it take for you to make a pact with the devil? Fortune? Maybe a little bit of fame? Or how about eternal life? In the 6th century AD, all it took Theophilus of Adana was a better job. The story of Theophilus is one of the earliest accounts of a person selling their soul to the devil. To understand how it happened, I have to take you back in time. It's the early 500s in the Byzantine Empire, shortly after the fall of Rome. Theophilus is the Archdeacon of Adana. He was unanimously elected as the bishop, but turned the position down to show his humility. The position was then filled by somebody else. If Theophilus wasn't going to take it, the position still had to be filled. Things then took a turn for the worse. After Theophilus turned down being bishop, he lost his position as Archdeacon. He could have taken the job, but trying to show himself as a humble man, ended up losing everything. Nobody likes losing their job. This kind of thing can bring out the worst in people, as it did with our protagonist. Theophilus was so upset that he sought a necromancer to change his fate. What's the craziest thing you've ever done after losing your job? I bet it wasn't as crazy as hiring a necromancer to contact Satan. The devil demanded Theophilus renounce Christ and the Virgin Mary, which he did. Then he signed a contract with his own blood, securing his position as bishop. Theophilus was a real person, but whether he sold his soul to the devil or not is a matter of speculation. The story ends about a year later, when Theophilus repented for his sin. He fasted for 40 days, then the Virgin Mary appeared to him. After fasting for another 30 days, he was granted absolution. When he finally managed to break the contract with Satan, he died from an overload of joy. Theophilus' death is recorded as happening in 538 in the kingdom of the Franks. It's among the earliest Christian tales of the devil making a bargain for a human soul. Devil coins. Bath Abbey in England has been home to one church or another since 757 AD. During restoration work 5 years ago, archaeologists found some odds and ends hiding underneath the stalls. They found random pieces of change and an order of service from May 15, 1902. They also found 2 coins emblazoned with the image of Satan on them. The coins were shocking, to say the least. On one side of each coin was the image of the devil, accompanied by the Latin phrase Civitas Diaboli. On the other side of the coin was 13 Ma Anholt, 1973. It seemed the members of the Wessex archaeology team had stumbled upon the trail of devil worshippers. The unusual coins were traced back to something outrageous that happened in 1973. On the remote island of Anholt in Denmark, people started finding signs of satanic rituals. This was just as the satanic panic was ramping up in America. On the Danish island were masks that looked like they were used in voodoo rituals. People found bones wrapped in strings. There was even a fake human head impaled on a stake and stabbed into the sand. A police officer was called in from the mainland to investigate. The Danish cop carefully catalogued and took pictures of the ritual items. The entire island was feverish and shaking with panic. Folks were frightened to go out at night. People thought the Satanists were waiting for the next full moon to start murdering people. No murders ever came. But just as the story started to go away, the devil coins began to appear. In the years that followed, around 370 devil coins were found across Denmark and Scandinavia. The ones found at Bath Abbey are the only ones ever discovered in the UK. The mystery went unsolved for years. Even as the hype train came to a halt, somebody kept sending newspapers chilling letters. This individual called themselves Satanic High Priestess Alice Mandragora. The letters were all about drinking blood soup and other horrific things. In 2004, the letters stopped. The letters ceased because Alice Mandragora was dead. Only her name wasn't Alice. His name was Knud Lanko, the most dedicated prankster in human history. It was unveiled in 2013 that Knud was behind the satanic objects and the devil coins and the weird letters to the press. He terrorized the world for decades and took his secret to the grave when he died in 2004 at the age of 73. Can you imagine being so dedicated to a prank that you manufactured hundreds of fake coins and distributed them around the globe? You really have to give Knud a round of applause for taking satanic pranking to the next level. Even on his deathbed, he kept the secret so the prank could live on. Number 5. The devil made me do it. What if you could blame all your poor behavior on the devil? He is an awfully convenient scapegoat. In the 1980s, Anne Cheyenne Johnson tried to do exactly that. It was the first case in the history of US law in which a defense attorney tried to get their client off based on the devil making them do the crime. The long story is crazier than you could ever imagine. Strap in because this is a wild ride. In 1980 was when the chaos began. 11-year-old David Glatzel was allegedly possessed by the devil. David was the brother-in-law of Anne Johnson. Anne was set to be married to Debbie, David's sister. Anne and Debbie had recently taken possession of a new house. In that house, David said he was confronted by a creature that looked like the devil from a Halloween costume. The devil had eyes that were black as a chunk of coal. The devil reached out for David and slipped into his soul. What followed was straight from the Amityville Horror, which is also a true story in case you didn't know. David exhibited blatant signs of possession. He claimed the demon appeared to him as a demonic beast and muttered threats in Latin. David started having night terrors. He behaved in an unexplainable way. The family, terrified the child was truly possessed by Satan, reached out to the Catholic Church. The church sent a priest to bless the house. This freaked the family out because now they thought the house was evil. Then in came the most famous demonologists in modern memory, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Lorraine claimed she saw black mist materialize near David, a clear indication of an evil presence. Debbie claimed David had been beaten and strangled by an invisible force. He would randomly recite paragraphs from the Bible and would speak in tongues. The Warrens believed it was time for an exorcism. 3 small exorcisms were performed on the boy. Lorraine claimed he levitated during one of them. It was during one of these exorcisms that David supposedly demonstrated precognition. He predicted the murder that was soon to be committed by Arne Johnson, his sister's boyfriend. It's at this point in the story that the haunting transitions into true crime. During one of the exorcisms, Arne coerced the demon to possess him instead. This is exactly what happened. Days after the exorcism, Arne and Debbie moved into a new apartment. Arne began showing signs of possession eerily similar to the signs David had shown. Debbie was terrified that her boyfriend was now under control of the demon. On February 16, 1981, Arne murdered his landlord, Alan Bono. He said that he did it because of the demon that possessed him. The court didn't buy it though, and he was convicted of first-degree manslaughter. Arne would serve 5 years in prison, though nobody would ever know if the devil really made him do it. Number 4. The Devil's Church Cave. Every year, thousands of people journey to a dark and creepy cave in Finland. The pilgrims are there for a reason many couldn't even fathom. The visitors seek out the cave to speak with the devil. This mysterious cavern, known as the Devil's Church, is located in Colli. It has a majorly disturbing reputation. Much like the ancient Maya cenotes that were believed to lead to the underworld, Devil's Church Cave is said to brush up against the spirit realm. Those who enter the cavern claim they immediately feel the presence of something powerful within. But is it the devil, wishful thinking, or something even weirder? Scientists at the University of Eastern Finland recently set out on a mission to uncover the truth behind the cave. As it turns out, there is a scientific explanation for the devil whispering in people's ears. The cave has a unique acoustic resonance. The resonance makes it seem as if thousands of voices are whispering in unison, though hardly perceptible. The analysis of the cave showed its stone walls create a natural frequency of 231 Hz. Scientists brought modern practitioners of shamanism into the cavern, who confirmed it has an incredible energy. That energy is, according to science, the bizarre manipulation of sound bending between the narrow walls. But why do people even want to speak to the devil? In local folklore, the Devil's Church was used regularly for magic rituals. A healer by the name of Kiinalainen took his patients to the cave where he spoke with the devil. The devil would tell him how to cure whatever was bothering his patient. Maybe the devil isn't in this Finnish cave, but it's certainly in the details. Scientists think unique frequencies could explain why certain places give us that familiar, creepy feeling. You know the one I mean. It isn't a demon or bad juju. It could be as simple as sound waves making it feel as though an evil force is present. Number 3. Lucifer's Fall, Part 3. Listen to this passage from the book of Isaiah. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. Above the stars of God, I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. From a totally unbiased standpoint, this sounds a lot like the description of a foul king or an evil emperor. Don't you think so? The passage goes on to say things like, he who did not let his prisoners go home. That sounds like a bad king, like a ruler who ruined his nation and was despised by his people. This particular passage from the book of Isaiah does not mention an evil entity. It says nothing about Lucifer. Nonetheless, this is another example used by Christians to support the mythology of Lucifer being cast down from heaven. This particular passage is also the only one in the whole Bible that mentions anything resembling hell. I'm sure you know about hell, the place that's supposedly filled with fire and brimstone, impish demons with horns and a big red guy with hooves, a forked tongue and a pitchfork. Every single story you've ever heard about hell comes from the line, to the far reaches of the pit. It's amazing to think such a short line of text has inspired so many horrors. Sure, there are other examples in the Bible that have been interpreted as proof of hell. The Bible does say that those who do not follow God will be eternally punished, though it doesn't say anything about a fiery pit. Another confusing part of the whole hell thing is that in English translations hell does appear, but only as a confused translation of different words. There are 4 words from Greek and Hebrew that have been changed to hell in English versions of the Bible. The word Sheol, which is Hebrew, is a word that means grave. The passage brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit, can be interpreted most literally as being buried in a deep grave. Two other words that have been translated as hell are undoubtedly familiar to you. Those words are Hades and Tartarus, both of which are from Greek mythology. Hades isn't even really hell, it's just a place where departed souls go. Tartarus is the deepest part of Hades and the closest mythical thing to our modern view of hell. The fourth and final word is Gehenna, which is a physical place in Jerusalem that was used as a garbage dump. In the Bible, Gehenna is interpreted as hell when in reality it was used as a metaphor. Kind of like telling someone to go live in the dump because they are garbage. Harsh, I know, but that's what the Bible was doing by using the word Gehenna. To sum things up nicely with a red devilish bow, there is no Lucifer in the Bible and there is no hell. Or maybe there is. That's the fun part of history's top bestseller. It's so widely open to interpretation that it can mean whatever you want it to mean. Number 2. The rise of Satan. Whatever you might think about Satan's role in the Bible, there's something shocking happening right now that you ought to know about. In the United States of America, Satanism is on the rise in a very real and publicly present way. Satanists are taking over the streets. This isn't like the satanic panic of the 1980s and 1990s. If you're old enough to remember, it's hard to forget just how feverish and widespread the panic over Satanism was. It was reminiscent of what happened in Salem in 1692 with the witch trials. There were over 12,000 unsubstantiated cases of satanic ritual abuse. It's shocking nobody was burned at the stake. Even if you were around to see it, you might not know where the panic all started. The real explosion of satanic fear has been traced back to the 1980 publication of a book called Michelle Remembers. It was written by a Canadian psychiatrist named Lawrence Pastor. The book was all about ritual abuse involving his patient/wife Michelle Smith and how she was involved in Satanism. After the book, things spiraled out of control. Satanic panic pervaded just about every corner of America. It was exacerbated by movies like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby. Suddenly, everyone knew someone who had been possessed by a demon. There were allegations of cannibalism and devil worship in middle-class suburbia. Many of the conspiracy theories alive during the Satanic Panic are still alive today. Most notably the conspiracy that global elites, such as Taylor Swift, are involved in abducting children. And what do people like T. Swift allegedly do with these kids? They sacrifice them to gods like Molech from the Old Testament and Satan. Out of the alleged 12,000 cases of satanic activity, not one was ever substantiated. Not even one. The panic that swept across America was a huge cultural event, yet not a single real case of devil worship joined by ritual abuse was ever discovered. It was the hysteria of the whole ordeal that makes me think of what happened in Salem, Massachusetts. People believed the devil was walking the streets and that their friends were practicing witchcraft. Neighbor testified against neighbor, resulting in people being hanged. Now in 2024, the Satanic Temple is giving out satanic scholarships. The scholarships are not particularly large, only $500 each, but it's better than no money at all. The real kicker, and if you've reached this point in the video, I'm sure you'll appreciate it, is that the Satanic Temple is located in Salem. Number 1. The Devil on TV. Have you heard the rumor of the devil broadcasting to the American public on August 29, 1968? It's a seriously creepy urban legend that may or may not be true. The tale goes like this. All the televisions suddenly shut down, going to static. But the static had a weird murmuring that sounded evil. When people put their ears close to the TV, they heard a demonic voice. It was believed that the devil's voice managed to mumble through every TV screen in the country for about 25 seconds. Then they all turned back on. There isn't any historical evidence that this happened. There's never been a verified event in which every TV in America shut down at once. This particular tale of satanic activity is most likely not true. Still, it's become a prevalent rumor and appears across all social media. Then again, if the devil did whisper to every American for 25 seconds, it's unlikely such an event would make it into the news. Nobody would want to admit the devil talked to them. What are your thoughts on the devil? Is he real? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe and come back soon for more awesome videos from the channel.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Who is Satan? In the Christian faith, the devil is typically referred to as Satan and sometimes as Lucifer, which was his original name before his fall from grace. He represents the personification of evil and is a fallen angel who rebelled against God in an attempt to become his equal. Satan is often considered to be the serpent that tempted Eve to eat fruit from the forbidden tree in the Garden of Eden and is sometimes symbolized by a snake. He's been represented in many different ways throughout history and is often depicted as having an unsightly combination of ram, pig, and goat features. There are some variations in the beliefs surrounding the devil among different branches of mainstream Christianity, but generally speaking, he represents the antithesis of the truth and God's primary opponent. He's blamed for tempting people to commit sins and do things that violate their faith. Satan is not more powerful than God. The only reason he gets away with the things he does is because God does not always stop bad things from happening and often chooses not to interfere with Satan's evil deeds. While most Western versions of Christianity teach that the devil sins deliberately, the Eastern Orthodox faith believes that sinning is an inescapable weakness and a form of selfishness through which the devil created death. Some, but not all Christians, believe that Satan lives in hell. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in hell, period. Their teachings dictate that Satan influences nations, individuals, and organizations, and that his job isn't to punish the wicked, but to try leading people astray from a path of righteousness. Old Testament. The book that Christians refer to as the Old Testament is based on the Hebrew Bible. It depicts the devil as more of a nuisance and an adversary, rather than a persistent antagonist. In the book of Genesis, a serpent tempts Eve to eat fruit from a forbidden tree in the Garden of Eden. It's the only forbidden tree out of many that Adam and Eve are allowed to eat from, and Eve's decision to pick fruit from it had eternal consequences. It turned her and Adam from perfect beings with eternal life into mere mortals who would eventually die, and it came along with numerous other consequences. The serpent that tempted Eve has long been associated with Satan in Christianity, and the concept of the devil is vaguely alluded to a handful of times elsewhere throughout the Old Testament. But as National Geographic journalist Marina Montesano pointed out in 2018, many experts believe that the story predates the concept of the devil. It isn't until the books of Isaiah and Ezekiel that the fall of Lucifer is mentioned, which is why some theologians dismiss the notion that the writers of Genesis saw Satan as God's direct opponent. The New Testament. Satan becomes an active force of evil in the New Testament, which is a Christian continuation of the Old Testament. It's in these books that the devil's persona begins to really take form, turning him more into a specific character than a vague presence that misguides people through temptation. In Matthew 4:9, Satan tempts Jesus to abandon his mission, telling him to fall down and worship me. The first epistle of Peter contains a cautionary warning to be disciplined and describes the devil as a roaring adversary like a lion, further stating that he's constantly on the prowl, searching for someone to devour. Satan continued to evolve throughout the New Testament. By the final book, Revelation, his role became more specifically focused on defying and trying to overthrow God and heaven. It's almost as if there were two different devils between the Old and New Testaments. Their link to each other can be found in a 4th century translation of the Hebrew Bible into Latin, known as the Vulgate. It's in this translation in the Gospel of Luke that Satan is described as an angel named Lucifer, whose fall from heaven was like a flash of lightning. During the early Middle Ages, writers would further build on this concept, as well as the idea of Satan as a ferocious villain who is intent on destroying anything godly, the number of the beast. Chances are you've heard that the number 666 has something to do with the devil, but many people know little about its origins. The book of Revelation refers to the number 666 as the number of the beast, also sometimes called the mark, and it's widely seen as a symbol of the Antichrist. Its exact meaning is debated, and some believe that it's a coded message. The actual passage, Revelation 13:18, reads, "Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. One interpretation claims that the beast was an evil, homely creature that the author of Revelation saw in a dream. It was capable of performing miracles, but these deeds came at a cost. The being demanded that everyone would be marked for purposes of buying and selling anything, and anyone who refused to worship the beast would be killed. Early Christians wrote in Greek, and each letter of the alphabet corresponded with a number. In a unique coding practice called isopsophy, a reader could identify words with hidden connections by adding up the numeric total of all the letters in a word and finding other words or groups of words with corresponding values. Words they found that were numerically equal to each other were thought to have some type of special connection. Many theologians believe that 666 is expressed as an isopsophy in Revelation, although some early manuscripts express the number as 616. But not everyone is convinced that 666 is an isopsophy. In his book Revelation, The Spirit Speaks to the Churches, biblical theology professor James M. Hamilton thinks that there is powerful repetition of the number 6. He also describes the number 7 as a symbol of completeness or perfection. In his view, if Jesus had a number, it would be 777. On the other hand, Hamilton views the number 666 as a cheap imitation of Jesus and as a warning in the book of Revelation for people to heed caution to its deceptiveness. For example, what he calls false Christs included people like the Emperor Nero, as well as modern-day individuals who represent a rebellious diversion from God's ways. Other scholars have interpreted 666 as a direct reference to Nero as well. Hamilton warned against participating in cultures that encourage the worship of false gods and those which discourage the Bible's teachings. Would you rather have 2 horns coming out of your head, or have the head of a goat with a human body? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Satan during the Middle Ages. One of the most historically famous depictions of Satan came in John Milton's 1677 poem, Paradise Lost. It describes the devil as an angel named Lucifer, who went from being the most beautiful of all the angels to being the biggest enemy of God and man. Lucifer rebelled against God and became Satan. In addition to establishing Satan as the foe of mankind and the Heavenly Father, Milton's poem greatly contributed to the image of the devil as a tempter of sin. While this idea is rooted in biblical passages, the Christian Bible mentions Satan far less than one might think. There are only a handful of verses about the devil, and none of them go into the level of detail that later depictions do, including when it comes to Satan's appearance. The devil's image transformed rapidly during the Middle Ages. It was during this time that he took on a noticeably more demonic appearance, which included animalistic traits influenced by elements of earlier religions. Another influential literary work, Dante's Inferno, helped to shape a more detailed image of both the devil and the depths of hell where he lives. Published in the 14th century, it describes Satan as a winged being with bat-like, hairless wings and 3 faces, each with crunching teeth. This is just one example of how the devil's appearance evolved to be increasingly more vicious-looking. Satan's role and character also changed during this period. Much like in the Old Testament, in the early Middle Ages, Satan was more of an adversary of God than an active enemy. The notion of him being a persistently aggressive character who's on a mission to torment and destroy souls came along a little later. People's fear of the devil grew along with this transforming image, thereby increasing the influence he had on the population at large. The dark period that England experienced during the 14th century only seemed to add credibility to the concept of Satan as an avid evildoer, rather than a diabolical but passive bystander. Beelzebub as Satan. The Old Testament names a Canaanite deity named Beelzebub, whose name translates to Lord of the Flies, although the actual meaning of the name is debated. Beelzebub is described in the Book of Kings as a false idol that must be shunned by the Hebrews. He was worshipped by an ancient group of people called the Philistines, who lived along Canaan's southern coast from the 12th century BC to the early 7th century AD. Some believe that Beelzebub had some sort of connection with cults devoted to flies. Just as flies are considered dirty creatures today who feast on excrement and garbage, they were also seen as filthy during ancient times. In one text, dating back to the Ugaritic kingdom that once existed in modern-day Syria, the flies being expelled from Beelzebub are traced as the source of a person's sickness. Another interpretation of old texts attributes Beelzebub as a pile of excrement and his followers as flies. In Christian sources, Beelzebub is another name for Satan. He's also one of the 7 princes of hell. A book on demonology called the Dictionnaire Infernal describes Beelzebub as being able to fly. In the Testament of Solomon, a prince of demons named Beelzebub claims to be a former angel of heaven. This helped give rise to the idea that Beelzebub and Lucifer are the same being who became Satan as a fallen angel. The name Beelzebul appears numerous times throughout the New Testament, including in the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Beelzebub is eventually used as a substitute for Satan, but they appear to describe either the same or a similar character or concept, and are sometimes used interchangeably. But in some cases, Beelzebub was described as a different entity from the devil, and even as an adversary who led a successful revolt against Satan. 16th century occultist Johann Weyer depicted Beelzebub as Lucifer's chief lieutenant and the emperor of hell. He's one of 3 prominent fallen angels, with the other 2 being named as Lucifer and Leviathan. Beelzebub represented different sins to different theologians and religious writers over the centuries. Some, like 17th century exorcist Sebastian Michaelis, associated him with pride, while others, including German bishop and theologian Peter Binsfeld, labeled Beelzebub as the demon of gluttony. He has also been blamed for numerous suspected cases of demonic possession throughout history, dating back to the 17th century, including some of the alleged events leading up to the Salem witch trials. Satan's entourage. Most known versions of Satan don't place him in hell by himself. He isn't someone who acts purely alone. He is in the company of like-minded others, including evil spirits and servants. As the story goes in Revelations, when Satan fell from heaven, he did not fall alone. In fact, Scripture states that 1/3 of the angels followed him, and they are now a network of demons that help him accomplish his evil purposes. Demons carry out Satan's evil deeds in the mortal world. These grim tasks include tempting human beings into committing sins and terrorizing people. The term demon is rooted in the Greek word daimon, which has meanings like spirit and guide. And for all intents and purposes, a demon is a spiritual guide, but one who leads people to do bad things and cross over to the dark side, rather than to obey God's ways and live a respectable, wholesome lifestyle. Peter Lombard, a scholastic theologian and the Bishop of Paris in 1159, believed that all angels were originally created as good spirits. However, when they were given the agency to decide what they wanted to stand for, some chose love and were rewarded by God with grace, but some amongst them chose sin, and they consequently became demons, those of which would serve Satan and witchcraft. Throughout history, witchcraft has occasionally been referred to as the devil's work. Witchcraft has been around for thousands of years, and it wasn't directly associated with Satan until the 15th century. Before then, spiritual concepts about the unknown and other aspects of mysticism weren't seen as strictly good or evil, but as a combination of both. The concept of witchcraft as a form of demonic or satanic worship took form during the Middle Ages. It was a particularly paranoid historical period, plagued by disease, persecution, and holy wars. In their search for explanations for why certain things were happening, people were quick to blame evil, and, along with it, individuals they accused of practicing harmful religious rituals. Witchcraft was labeled as an evil act in Christian churches throughout Europe as early as the 13th century. Witches themselves were seen as Satan's servants who carried out his dirty work on earth. As backwards as these views seem, they ironically took form during a time when people had increased access to biblical texts. Commoners were also becoming more literate at a time when reading and writing were largely restricted to the more privileged classes. Some of the harmful views people developed resulted directly from their first-hand interpretations of the Bible, which was happening among the masses for the first time ever. They took passages about evil and Satan and applied them to everyday situations, and in some cases became quick to blame mortal mishaps on spiritual misbehavior. Blaming someone's behavior on witchcraft also made it conveniently easy to banish them from the church, especially since worshippers were quick to believe these allegations. At that point in time, the Christian religion was rife with hysteria, and people were far more likely to take a better safe than sorry approach to accusations against one of their own for witchcraft, rather than to give the person the benefit of the doubt. Consequently, many innocent people were imprisoned, tortured, and executed in both Europe and the New World. Thanks for watching. What do you personally believe Satan is? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Bye.